The silk was too tight. That was the first thought that pierced through the fog in Elara's mind. The constriction around her throat was not the gentle embrace of a lover, but the deliberate, crushing grip of a man's hand. The air in her lungs burned, and the world swam in a haze of crimson and gold. She was on her knees, the cold, unyielding marble of the great hall pressed into her bones, a familiar ache that sent a jolt of recognition through her. This was the throne room of King Aldric, but the throne was not hers to sit upon, not an ink. A cruel laugh echoed, a sound she knew as intimately as her own heart beat. It belonged to her sister Seraphina. The woman who had once read her dolls and her secrets, now stood before her, draped in a gown of sapphire silk that had been cut from the very fabric Elara had commissioned for her own coronation. Her dark, so like Elra's own, was woven with diamonds that winked like frozen tiaras. Did you truly believe you could be queen? Elara. Seraphina's voice was honey-laced with hemlock. You were always so naive, a simple dove, fluttering in a nest of hawks. Elara tried to speak, but the hand at her throat tightened, cutting off any sound. She looked up into the face of the man she had loved with every fiber of her being, Lord Julian Ashford, her husband, the man she had given her kingdom for. His face, once the most handsome in the realm, was twisted into a mask of contempt. His eyes, the deep, forest green she had lost herself in 1,000 times, were now cold and ruthless. He had been the one to lead the siege against her father. He had been the one to promise her safety if she opened the gates. He had been the one who had whispered sweet lies in the dark, while plotting her ruin in the light. You were a means to an end, my Julian said, his voice a chilling CRS. Your father's crown was always the prize. I simply needed you to deliver it to me. The betrayal was a physical blow, a sheer device that pierced her heart. She had loved him. She had trusted him with her life, with the lives of her people. And he had traded her for power, for the smiling viper at his side. From the shadows of the hall, another figure emerged, her mother, the Dowager Queen Beatrice. Her face was a perfect porcelain mask, devoid of the double worth Elara had once cherished. You brought shame to this family. Her mother said, her voice devoid of emotion. You were always too willful, too soft. Seraphina understands the necessity of ambition. She understands that a queen must be forged in steel, not in silk. The words were a final confirmation. Her own mother had been in on the plot. The letters she had written to her father, the whispered conspiracies she had overheard, it had all been a web, spun by the people she loved most, to trap her. Julian leaned down, his breath hot and sour against her ear. Don't worry, my dearling, you will die here, on the floor of your father's hall, a traitor to the crown. And your little rebellion will be extinguished forever. He released her throat, and she gasped for air, coughing and sputtering, but the respite was brief. She saw the flash of steel as Julian drew his dagger. The blade was the one she had gifted him on their wedding night, etched with the words, "Forever yours." The irony was a bitter poison on her tongue. Any last words, he asked, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Elara looked at the three of them, her husband, her sister, her mother, the trinity of her destruction. She had given them everything, and they had taken her life. Rage, hot and pure, began to burn in her chest, melting the ice of her despair. You will never be safe, she hissed, the words a broken whisper. You will never be able to rest, for the rest of your lives. You will see my face in every shadow. You will hear my voice in every scream. The throne you have stolen will turn to ash in your hands. Julian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but then he laughed, a dying woman's curse. How poetic. He raised the dagger. The firelight glinted off the polished steel. Elara closed her eye, bracing for the final searing pain. She thought of her father, her true father. The king who had loved her and been slain in his own bed. She thought of the children in the village, who would now be under the tyranny of her usurpers. The blade came down, but instead of the cold kiss of steel, there was only a flash of blinding white light. A searing pain ripped through her, as if her very soul was being torn from her body. Then, nothing, an endless, silent void. Then, the light returned. It was not the rash, unforgiving light of the throne room, but the soft, golden glow of sunlight filtering through linen curtains. The scent of lavender and beeswax filled her nostrils. Elara's eyes snapped open. She was not on the cold marble floor. She was in a bed, a soft, comfortable bed, enveloped in the familiar scent of her childhood. The ceiling above her was not the vaulted stone of the great hall, but the familiar white plaster of her bedchamber in the eastern wing of the castle. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She sat up abrupt, her hands flying to her throat. It was smooth. The phantom pain of Julian's grip was gone. She looked around the room, the vanity with the silver-handled brush, The window seat where she used to read, the tapestry her grandmother had woven. It was her room as it had been years ago, before the betrayal, before the Duguar. Her gaze fell upon a Nieri table. A small, ornate mirror lay upon it, half obscured by a disca-rotted silk ribbon. With trembling hands, she reached for it. The reflection that stared back at her was her own, but younger. Her face was fuller, free of the gaunt, haunted look that had marked her final days. There were no lines of grief around her eyes, no silver streaks in her chestnut hair. She was young again. She was 18. A wave of dizziness washed over her. This was a dream. It had to be a nightmare reborn of her dying mind. She pinched her arm. The sharp sting was real, incredibly, impossibly real. The door to her chamber flew open, and a young woman burst in. It was her handmaiden Lily. The girl was barely 17, her face still round with youth, her eyes bright with innocent joy. A ghost of a girl who had died on the battlefield, trying to protect Ilra's honor. "Milady!" Lily exclaimed, rushing to her bedside. "The master of the hunt says the stags are running wild in the royal wood. All the court is gathering in the courtyard to ride out. You must get ready." Ilra read at her, her mind reeling. The royal hunt. It was the day of the royal hunt. The day Julian Ashford, a rising star in her father's court, had first formally requested to be introduced to her. It was the day her sister Seraphina, with a smile so innocent, had tripped her in the mud, ruining her dress and making her a laughingstock. It was the day her mother had first double-arraigned her against Julian, calling him a man of dangerous ambition. She had not listened. She had thought him handsome and charming. She had been blind. But she was blind no more. Elara looked at Lily's eager face, a face she had mourned for 10 years, and felt a sob catch in her throat. She reached out and grasped the girl's hand. "Lily," she said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "What is today's date?" Lily looked at her, confused. "My lady. It is the 12th of the summer moon. The day of the king's hunt. The 12th of the summer moon." It was the day, the rotting point of her destruction. A cold, fierce clarity descended upon Elara. This was not a dream. This was not a trick of the mind. The gods, in their infinite cruelty or mercy, had given her a second chance. A chance to right the wrongs of the past. A chance to make them pay. She released Lily's hand and stood, walking to the window. She threw open the heavy curtains and looked down at the courtyard below. It was a sea of color and movement, noblemen in their finest silks, the flash of swords, the stamp of hooves. And there, at the center of it all, surrounded by sycophants, was Julian Ashford. He was younger, his face unmarred by the malice that would later twist it, but she saw it now, the ambition, the cold calculation behind the dazzling smile. Standing beside him, her hand delicately resting on his arm, was Seraphina, her sister, her sweet sister. Was dressed in a gown of deep green that complemented Julian's eyes, the perfect picture of demure innocence. Her mother, Lady Beatrice, stood near, observing the scene with a satisfied The trio, all of them in one place, all of them unsuspecting. A smile, sharp and predatory, curled Elara's lips. It was a smile that had never graced her face before. It was a smile of death and rebirth. Elara said, her voice no longer trembling. It was steady. "Clear Ray not going to the hunt. We are going to win." Lily blinked. "But the king is expecting you." "The king will have to wait," Elara replied, turning from the window. Her eyes, once full of love and trust, now held a fire that could burn the world. She walked to her wardrobe and threw open the doors. Her eyes scanned the rows of pastel silks and floral patterns. The wardrobe of a girl. She was no longer a girl. She was a woman forged in the fires of betrayal. Her fingers brushed past the soft fabrics until they landed on a single dress, pushed to the back. It was a deep, rich, the color of blood and rubies and vengeance. She had never worn it, deeming it too bold, too aggressive. Now it was perfect. "Help me dress, Lily," Elara commanded. "I have a hunt to attend." The crimson silk slid over Elara's skin like a second layer of armor. Lily's fingers moved with practiced efficiency, lacing the bodice tight enough to remind her that she was no longer the soft, trusting girl who had once worn pastels and smiled at every compliment. Each tug of the ribbon was a small act of douar, a declaration that the woman emerging from this chamber would not be the same one who had entered it. "Higher," Elara instructed, her voice calm but firm. "Tighter. I want to feel it." Lily hesitated, her young brow furrowing. "My lady, if I lace it any tighter, you will scarcely breathe." "Breathing is overrated," Elara replied, catching her own reflection in the polished silver of the vanity mirror. The face that stared back was hers, but the eyes were wrong. They were too sharp, too knowing. "A wolf we wring a lamb's skin. I will breathe when the hunt is done." The handmaiden complied, pulling the laces with a soft grunt of effort. Elara watched her own transformation in the mirror. The crimson gown hugged her figure with severe precision, its neckline a da-ring plunge that would scandalize the matrons of the court. The sleeves were long and fitted, tapering to points that covered the backs of her hands, giving her the look of a predator in human skin. Lily arranged her chestnut hair in a simple, elegant knot at the nape of her neck, leaving 2 deliberate tendrils to frame her face. No flowers, no adornment that would soften her. The jewels, my lady? Lily asked. Gesturing to the velvet case on the vanity, Elara opened it with a single finger, revealing the pieces her mother had given her on her 16th birthday. And sapphires, soft and sweet and utterly forgettable. She closed the case with a snap. She said, I will wear nothing that they have given me. Tonight, I am a canvas of my own making. From the bottom of the wardrobe, she retrieved a single piece she had kept hidden for years, a pendant of black onyx shaped into a tiara, suspended on a chain of dark silver. It had belonged to her grandmother, the Dowager Queen Isolde, a woman the court had whispered was a witch. Her mother had hated it. Elara had loved it. Now, she clasped it around her neck and felt the cool weight of it settle against her chest. A promise. Lily stepped back and clasped her hands, her eyes wide with wonder. My lady, you look like a queen. Elara allowed herself a small, bitter smile. But, I will. The corridors of the eastern wing were quiet. The castle having emptied itself into the courtyard for the hunt, Elara walked with measured steps, her heels clicking against the stone floor like a countdown. Every painting, every tapestry, every carved stone pillar held a memory she had buried deep. Here was where Julian had first kissed her, pressing her against the wall while the court danced nearby. There was where Seraphina had feigned a fainting spell to draw their father's attention away from Elara's recitation of poetry. Ahead, the staircase where her mother had once told her that love was a weakness, and that she would be wise to outgrow it. She had not outgrown it. She had been devoured by it. Now, she would become the devourer. The courtyard blazed with sunlight and color when she emerged from the great doors. The noise of the gathering hit her like a physical wave. The stamping of horses, the braying of hounds, the laughter of courtiers drunk on the promise of sport. Elara paused at the top of the marble steps, allowing the crowd to see her before she descended. The effect was immediate. A ripple of whispers spread through the assembly. Heads turned, conversations stuttered and died. She saw the matrons lean together, their fans snapping open to conceal their scandalized murmurs. She saw the young lords straighten their spines, their eyes tracing the severe lines of her crimson gown with something between shock and admiration. And she saw Julian Ashford. He was at the front of the gathering, astride a magnificent black stallion, his hunting leathers immaculate and his smile as dazzling as she remembered. But when his gaze found her, something flickered behind his green eyes. Sopran beneath it. Something that might have been unease. Let him be uneasy, let him be afraid. Elara descended the steps with the grace of a blade cutting through silk. She did not rush, she did not trip. Every step was deliberate, a statement of intent. The crowd pirouetted before her as if she ride a plague, and she walked through the gap like a queen surveying her subjects. You came, said a voice from behind her, and Elara felt her spine stiffen. She turned, her expression ruefully neutral, and found herself face to face with her sister. Seraphina was a vision of soft prettiness. Her gown was the color of spring violets, its neckline modest and its sleeves puffed with delicate lace. Her gay hair, so like Elara's, was woven with tiny white flowers, and her cheeks were flushed with the perfect amount of pink. She was the picture of innocence, of gentleness, of everything Elara had once been and would never be again. Did you think I would miss the hunt? Sister Elara asked, her voice light but carrying an edge that Seraphina could not possibly miss. Seraphina's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. I thought you might be feeling unwell. You looked rather pale at breakfast. She stepped closer, reaching out to touch Elara's arm. Are you sure you are well? You look so different. Elara did not flinch from the touch, but she did not lean into it either. She let Seraphina's fingers rest on her sleeve like a dead thing, unwanted and unacknowledged. I have never been better, sister, she replied. I simply decided it was time to stop hiding. Seraphina's eyes swept over the crimson gown, the severe knot of Elara's hair. Her smile remained in place, but Elara saw the calculation behind it, the quick assessment, the recalculating of a strategy. This was not the sister she had planned for. Seraphina said, the words dripping with false wrath. We have so much to celebrate today. The hunt, and then the feast tonight. Father says the king's ambassador from the northern provinces has brought gifts. Elara remembered the ambassador, she remembered the feast. She remembered the moment when Julian had slipped away from the table, and Seraphina had followed him. She remembered the sounds she had overheard in the J-Rodden, the soft gasps and laughter that had shattered her heart into 1,000 pieces. Not today, I look forward, Elara said smoothly, but first the hunt. Shall we see who brings down the first stag? Seraphina's smile widened, and for a moment, Elara saw the viper beneath the flowers. A wager. I thought you despised such things. I have changed my mind, Elara said. I find that I have a taste for blood. She left Seraphina standing there, her mouth slightly open, and walked toward the line of horses. The stable master, an old man named Gareth who had taught Elara to ride when she was 6, hurried forward with a chestnut Marie. It was the horse she had always ridden. A gentle creature with a kind eye and a steady gait. Ra said, surprising herself as much as Gareth, bring me the grey. Gareth blinked. My lady, the grey she is not broken in properly. She was wild stock from the northern hills. The grooms say she will never be truly tamed. I know, Elara said, bring her to me. The grey Marie was brought forward, tossing her head and rolling her eyes with really contained fury. The grooms held her with difficulty, their hands straining against the reins. The other riders backed away, their own horses skittish in the presence of such really leashed wildness. Elara approached the grey slowly. She had never ridden this horse in her first life, she had been too afraid. But she had watched from the balcony on many mornings as the grooms tried and failed to master her. She remembered the way the Marie had finally been sold to a butcher, unable to be tamed, deemed worthless. She was worthless to a world that only valued obedience. Elara understood that now. She met the Marie's wild, rolling eye and held it. You and I, she murmured, just loud enough for the horse to hear. They thought they could break us. They were wrong. She reached out, her hand steady, and placed it on the grey's neck. The memra shivered but did not rear. Elara felt the wild heart beat beneath her palm, rapid and she did not look away. I will never betray you, she whispered, and you will never betray me. That is what we will give each other. Loyalty. The grey's eyes seemed to calm, just slightly, her flanks still quivered, but she lowered her head, just a fraction of an inch. Elara swung onto the Marie's back without assistance, gathering the reins in her gloved hands. The grey danced sideways, testing her, but Elara held firm, her thighs gripping the saddle leather, with a strength she had not known she possessed. From the front of the procession, Julian Ashford turned to look at her. His eyes swept over the grey, over the dangerous gown, over the set of her jaw. He did not smile. For the first time since she had known him, he looked uncertain. Ladies and gentlemen, called the king from the head of the line. He was a robust man in his 50s, with a white beard and a booming laugh. He was also, Elara remembered with a stab of grief, dead within 3 years, poisoned in his own dining hall. Let the hunt begin. The horns sounded, the hounds bayed, the riders surged forward in a thunder of hooves and shouting. Elara did not follow the main pack, she held the grey in check, letting the others race ahead, and guided the Marie toward the edge of the wood where the trees grew thick and shadows lay deep. She knew this forest, she had hidden here as a child, escaping her tutors, dreaming of adventures. Now, she would use its secrets for a rocker purpose. The grey moved like a phantom through the underbrush, her hoofs silent on the soft loam. Her eyes scanning the dappled light for the prey she truly sought. She would not take down a stag today. She would take down a piece of the future. A rustle in the bushes to her left, she turned, her hand going to the small dagger concealed in her boot. But it was not a threat that emerged, it was a man. He stepped out of the shadows like a ghost made flesh, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in simple hunting leathers that did little to conceal the power in his frame. His hair was dark, almost black, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. He was not a noble she recognized from the court, and that alone made him dangerous. He held up his hands, showing they were empty. I mean you no harm, my lady, he said. His voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the trees. I am merely a traveler who lost his way. Elah! Her instincts screaming that this was no simple traveler. The way he stood, the set of his shoulders, the calluses on his hands, he was a wee rider. And he was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Travelers do not wander into the king's private hunting grounds, she said coolly. Not unless they have a death wish. The man smiled, and it changed his whole face. He was handsome, devastatingly so, in a way that Julian had never been. Julian's beauty had been polished and practiced. This man's beauty was raw, untamed, like the grey Marie beneath her. I have been called many things, he said, taking a step closer. Reckless, but never a cow, and only cowards fear death. Elara's grip on the reins tightened. Then you are either very brave or very stupid. Perhaps both, he replied, and his smile widened. But I did not approach you to discuss my character. I approached you because you are the most interesting thing in this forest. He gestured to her gown, to the pendant, to the wild horse beneath her. The other ladies of the court are redressed for a picnic. You are redressed for Guar. And you are riding a beast that the grooms could not tame. So I asked, my lady, what are you hunting? Elara looked at him, really looked, and felt something shift in her chest. A woe running. This man was dangerous in ways she could not yet fathom. Vengeance, she said. The word falling from her lips before she could stop it. The man's eyes glittered. Then perhaps we are hunting the same Rai. Before she could ask what he meant, a horn sounded in the distance. The main hunt was moving closer. The man stepped back, melting into the shadows as if he had never been there. Until we meet again, my lady, his voice drifted through the leaves, and we will meet again, I promise you that. Elara sat frozen on the grey marie, her heart pounding, the trees rustled, the horn blew again, and somewhere in the distance, she heard Julian's voice calling her name. She turned the grey toward the sound, her mind racing. Who was that? And what did he mean by hunting the same Rai? The questions burned in her throat, but she swallowed them down. She had come here to change the future, and somehow impossibly, the future had come looking for her first. The grey surged fora, and Elara rode toward the hunt with a smile of steel on her lips. The grey may ride Elara through the dense undergrowth with a predator's silence, her hooves finding purchase on moss and stone as if she had been born to these woods. Elara leaned low over the Mary's neck, her crimson skirts bunched around her thighs, her breath steady despite the wild beat of her heart. The man in the shadows had vanished as completely as morning mist, but his words clung to her like burrs. We will meet again, I promise you that. She did not know whether to fear that promise or welcome it. The horn sounded again, closer now, and Elara guided the grey toward the clear ring where the hunt had gathered. She burst through the tree line just as the hounds cornered a magnificent stag against a rocky outcropping. The beast was massive, its antlers a crown of ancient bone, its eyes wild with the knowledge of its own impending death. The riders circled, their horses stamping and snorting, their voices raised in excitement. Julian Ashford was at the center of the circle. His bow, the arrow knocked and aimed at the stag's heart. His face was a mask of concentration, his green eyes enrowed to slits. The crowd held its breath. Elara watched him, and in that moment, she saw not the man she had loved but the man who had murdered her. She saw the same cold calculation in his gaze, the same ruthless precision. He had killed her father, he had killed her people, and he had killed her with a dagger etched with promises he had never intended to keep. And now he was about to kill this stag, this magnificent creature, for nothing more than sport. Her hand moved to the small dagger in her boot. She did not draw it, not yet, but her fingers brushed the hilt, and the touch was a comfort, a reminder. She was no longer the girl who stood helpless while the world burned around her. She was the fire now. Julian released the arrow. It flew true, striking the stag just behind the shoulder. The beast staggered, its legs buckling, and crashed to the ground with a sound that seemed to shake the very wrath. The crowd erupted in cheers. Julian lowered his bow, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. But the smile faltered when he turned and saw Elara watching him. She did not clap, she did not smile. She simply sat on her grey marie, her crimson gown stark against the green of the forest, and met his gaze with the cold, unblinking stare of a predator sizing up its prey. Julian's horse shifted beneath him. He forced his smile back into place and rode toward her, his bow slung across his back. Ra, he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. I did not see you at the kill. I thought you might have lost your nerve. I was admiring the view, Elara replied, her tone as flat as a blade. The stag made a noble end. It is a pity that its last moments were spent surrounded by those who see a red only for its death, not its life. Julian's eyes flickered with something, annoyance, perhaps, or curiosity. You have a poet's tongue, my lady. I had not noticed it before. Perhaps you were not looking closely enough, she said. A man who does not look closely often misses the most important details. The poison in a cup, the knife in the dark, the betrayal festering in a trusted heart. Julian stiffened for just a moment, his mask slipped, and she saw a flash of genuine unease in his eyes, but he recovered quickly, his smile returning, though it did not reach his eyes. You speak in riddles, my lady, he said, his voice losing a fraction of its memph. I prefer plain speech. It is more honest, Elara laughed, a sound that had no humor in it. Oh Julian, you have never preferred honesty. You prefer the illusion of it. There is a difference. She turned the grey away from him, dismissing him as thoroughly as if he were a servant who had overstepped his bounds. She heard him draw breath to speak again, but she did not look back. Let him wonder, let him worry. The seeds of doubt she had planted would grow in the dark soil of his mind. And when they bloomed, they would choke him. The riders began to make their way back to the castle, the slain stag lashed to a cart and dragged behind them. Elara rode at the rear of the procession, her grey mare prancing and sidestepping, still restless with the wildness that no groom had ever tamed. She could feel eyes on her, the matrons whispering behind their fans, the lords calculating her worth, her sister's gaze burning into her back. Seraphina caught up to her as the castle walls came into view. Her violet gown was immaculate, not a single curl out of place, her horse a docile white palfrey that matched her carefully curated innocence. You were shirash with Lord Ashford, Seraphina said, her voice carrying a note of reproach. He is one of father's most valued allies. It would be unwise to alienate him. He is no Ra replied. He is a vulture waiting for the lion to die so he can feast on the carcass. Seraphina's eyes widened, the perfect picture of shock. Ra, such language. The court will think you have gone mad. Let them think what they wish, Elara said, her voice cold. I have stopped caring about what the court thinks. I have stopped caring about a great many things. Seraphina was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again her voice was softer. Sister, are you angry with me? Have I done something to offend you? Elara turned to look at her, really look. She studied the delicate curve of Seraphina's jaw, the way her lashes fluttered in practiced innocence, the slight tremor in her lower lip that had always made their father's heart melt. It was a masterpiece of deception, this sister of hers, a performance so flawless that even Elara, who knew the truth, could almost believe it. You have done nothing, Elara said. You have never done anything, that is the problem. You stand by and watch while others do your dirty work. And then you wash your hands and claim innocence. It is a clever strategy, sister, truly, but I see it now. Seraphina's smile vanished, for one brief, illuminating moment. Elara saw the hatred that lurked beneath her sister's sweet exterior. It was there and gone, like lightning in a storm, but Elara had seen it. I do not know what you mean, Seraphina whispered. Of course you do not, Ra said. You never do. They rode the rest of the way in silence. The castle gates opened before them, and the court spilled into the great courtyard, servants rushing forward to take the horses and grooms to carry the slain stag to the kitchens. The feast tonight would be a grand affair, with the stag's meat roasted and served to the nobility, while the common folk were left to scrape the bones. Elara dismounted from the grey mare, landing lightly on the cobblestones. She handed the reins to a groom and watched as he led the mare away. The grey turned her head and looked back at Elara, her wild eyes soft for just a moment, and Elara felt a strange kinship with the beast. They were both untamed, both misunderstood, both waiting for the chance to prove their worth. Lydia! She turned at the sound of her mother's voice. Dowager Queen Beatrice stood on the steps of the great hall, her gown a severe black, her silver hair pinned in a tight coil. Her face was as unreadable as stone, but her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, missed nothing. Elara said, inclining her head in the rest nod of respect. Beatrice said, we must speak. It was not a request. Elara followed her mother into the castle, through the great hall and up the winding staircase to the private chambers of the royal family. The corridor was lined with portraits of her ancestors, their painted eyes watching her with silent judgment. She stopped before a portrait of her grandmother, Dowager Queen Isolde, and studied the woman's face. The black onyx pendant around Elara's neck seemed to pulse with Gularith. Isolde had been accused of witchcraft. She had been shunned by the court. She had been exiled to the Eastern Tower for the last 20 years of her life, alone and forgotten. But she had also been the only person who had ever told Elara the truth about her family. Your mother will sell you for a handful of silver, Isolde had said, her voice cracked with age. Your sister will smile while she cuts your throat. Your father loves you but he is blind. And the men who will court you are wolves in silk. Remember that, child, remember it well. Elara had not remembered. She had been too young, too trusting, too eager to see the good in everyone, but she remembered now. Her mother's chambers were a study in controlled elegance. Everything was in its place, from the perfectly arranged flowers to the meticulously folded linens. There was no room for chaos here, no room for emotion. This was the lair of a woman who had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of appearances. Beatrice seated herself in an upholstered chair and gestured for Elara to do the same. Elara chose a rudder chair instead, one with a straight back that forced her to sit upright. You caused quite a stir today, Beatrice began. The horse, your behavior toward Lord Ashford, people are talking. Let them ta, said. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. Do not be impertinent, child, you are not yet queen, and even if you were, you would not speak to me in such a tone. I meant no disrespect, Elara said, though her tone suggested otherwise. I simply believe that the court has been talking about me for years, and I have never done a thing to on their gossip. If they are going to talk anyway, I might as well give them something worth discussing. Beatrice studied her for a long moment, her gaze sharp and disconcerting. You have changed, she said finally. Something has happened to you. Elara met her mother's gaze without flinching. Yes, I woke up. I do not understand what that means. I do not expect you to, mother. You have never understood me. That was always the problem, wasn't it? You saw me as a piece on your chessboard, a pawn to be moved in your game, but pawns can become queens, mother. That is the beauty of chess. And when a pawn reaches the other side of the board, she is no longer bound by the rules of the game. She makes her own. Beatrice's face paled. For the first time, Elara saw a crack in her mother's perfect composure. You are speaking treason, Elara. I am speaking truth, Elara said. You can call it treason if you wish. But we both know the truth, mother. We both know what you and Seraphina and Julian Ashford have planned. The question is not whether I know. The question is whether you will be foolish enough to continue. She rose from her chair and walked toward the door. Her hand was on the handle when her mother's voice stopped her. What do you want, Elara? Her mother's face was a mask of serene neutrality, but her hands were trembling where they rested on the arms of her chair. It was a small detail, but Elara noticed it. I want what I have always wanted, Elara said. I want justice for my father, for my people, for myself, and I will have it, mother. One way or another, I will have it. She left her mother sitting alone in the perfect starab, the flowers wilting and the shadows growing long. She walked through the corridors with the gray's wildness in her step, the black onyx pendant arm against her chest, her mind already spinning the next thread in the web she would weave. The feast was set for that night, the stag would be roasted, the wine would flow, and the court would gather to celebrate a hunt that had been, by all accounts, a success, but Elara knew better. The real hunt was just beginning. She paused at a window overlooking the courtyard and saw Julian Ashford below, deep in conversation with a man she did not recognize. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, his back to her, but something about the set of his frame seemed familiar. As if in answer to her thought, the man turned. It was the stranger from the forest, the one with the storm cloud eyes and the promise of a future meeting. He looked up at her window, his gaze finding her as if he had known she would be there. A slow smile spread across his face, and he raised his hand in a gesture that was not quite a wave, not quite a salute. Elara felt the breath catch in her throat. Who was this man? And what was he doing speaking with Julian Ashford? The questions burned in her mind as the man turned away, melting into the crowd as easily as he had melted into the shadows of the forest. Julian watched him go, his expression guarded, and then he too disappeared into the throng. Elara stood at the window, her heart pounding, the pendant at her throat feeling heavier than it had before. The feast would begin soon. The game was in motion, and somewhere in the shadows, a stranger with storm cloud eyes was playing a game of his own. The great hall of King Aldric transformed at night into a cavern of gold and shadow. 1,000 candles flickered in iron chandeliers, their light dancing off tapestries that depicted the heroic victories of ancient kings. The long oak tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, glazed, and silver platters piled high with bread still balm from the ovens. The scent of rosemary and wine hung thick in the air, mingling with the perfumes of the nobility and the subtle, ever-present musk of ambition. Elara entered the hall on her father's arm. King Aldric was a man of considerable girth, his face weathered by years of rule and his eyes bright with the simple pleasures of food, drink and the adoration of his court. He did not see the vipers coiled in his own nest. He did not see the plots being woven in his shadow. He saw only his daughters, his kingdom, and the illusion of peace. You look magnificent tonight, my diva, King said, patting her hand with paternal warmth. That gown is a bold choice, very bold. Your mother is not pleased. I know, Father, Elara replied, her voice soft. I take comfort in that. The king laughed, a booming sound that turned heads. You have spirit, Elara, I always said so. You remind me of your grandmother, you know. Isolde had the same fire. The court never knew what to do with her either. Elara felt the pendant at her throat pulse with due wrath, as if her grandmother's spirit had heard the words and approved. I miss her, she said quietly. As do I, the king admitted, his smile fading for just a moment. She saw things the rest of us did not. Perhaps she saw too much. It made her lonely. He squeezed her hand. Do not be lonely, my child. That is a burden no one should bear alone. Elara swallowed the bitter truth that rose in her throat. She was already alone. Her father, for all his love, was a blind man stumbling toward a cliff. And she was the only one who could stop him from falling. She took her seat at the high table, beside her father and across from Seraphina. Julian Ashford was seated further down, among the lesser nobility. But she could feel his gaze on her like a weight. She did not look at him. She had learned that lesson well. If you wanted to unnerve a predator, you pretended they did not exist. The feast began in earnest. Servants circulated with pitchers of wine and platters of delicacies. Musicians played in the gallery, their melodies weaving through the noise of conversation and laughter. Elara ate sparingly, her mind elsewhere, her eyes scanning the hall for the stranger with storm-cloud eyes. She did not find him. But she did find something else. Seraphina leaned across the table, her smile radiant, her voice pitched for Elara's ears alone. I heard the most interesting rumor today. Sister, they say a northern lord has arrived at court, a man of considerable power, though his name is unknown to most. They say he keeps company with the king's advisors, and that he has an interest in the royal succession. Elara's hand stilled on her goblet. A northern lord, I have heard nothing of this. Of course you have not, Seraphina said, her eyes glinting. You have been too busy riding wild horses and scandalizing the court. But I thought you should know. He is said to be very handsome. And very interested in you. Elara met her sister's gaze. Why would a northern lord be interested in me? Seraphina shrugged, a gesture of practiced nonchalance. Perhaps he has heard of your beauty. Perhaps he has heard of your, she paused, reaching for the right word, unpredictability. The north is full of strange men with strange tastes. Perhaps he likes a woman who cannot be tamed. Elara felt the pendant grow warm again, and a strange certainty settled in her chest. The stranger from the forest, the man with storm-cloud eyes, he was the northern lord Seraphina spoke of. And he was interested in her. Why were you telling me this, Seraphina? She asked, her voice flat. What is your angle? Seraphina's smile widened, but there was something sharp beneath it. Dar sister, I simply wanted to warn you. A man of his standing, if he truly is of standing, might be a suitable match, but you must be careful. He might not be what he seems. Elara said. Who is exactly what you seem? Seraphina's smile froze for a moment. Elara saw the hatred flicker in her sister's eyes again. There and gone like a snake striking and retreating. Then Seraphina laughed, a bright, tinkling sound that drew the attention of those nearby. You are in a strange mood tonight, Elara. But I forgive you, it must be difficult. Living in my shadow. She turned away, engaging in conversation with a lord on her left, leaving Elara to sit with the taste of poison on her tongue. The feast continued, the wine flowed. The laughter grew louder and more raucous. Elara watched it all with the detached eye of a general surveying a battlefield. She saw the subtle glances exchanged between her mother and Julian. She saw the way Seraphina's hand brushed against the arm of a young lord, a gesture of calculated intimacy. She saw the courtiers circling like sharks, each one waiting for the moment when the king's attention would falter, and they could strike. And then she saw him. The stranger from the forest entered the great hall through a side door. His arrival so subtle that most of the court did not notice, but Elara noticed. She had been waiting for him. He had changed from his hunting leathers into formal attire. A tunic of deep charcoal velvet, embroidered with silver thread in patterns she did not recognize, a heavy cloak lined with dark fur hung from his shoulders, and a sword of northern make hung at his hip. He was taller than she remembered, broader, his presence seeming to fill the space around him like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. His eyes found hers immediately, and she felt the intensity of his gaze like a physical touch. He walked through the hall with the ease of a man who had never doubted his place in the world. The courtiers pirouetted before him, their whispers trailing in his wake like the wake of a ship. He approached the high table, bowed to the king with practiced grace, and straightened to meet Elara's eyes once more. Your Majesty, he said, his voice a low rumble that ride easily over the noise of the feast. I am Lord Cal of the Northern Reaches. I have traveled a great distance to pay my respects to your court. Lord Cal, I have heard of your exploits. They say you drove the Barbarian tribes from the northern passes. They say you are a man of considerable, he paused, reaching for the word, accomplishment. Your Majesty is too kind, Cal said. I am merely a soldier who does his duty. He turned to Elara, and his smile was a blade wrapped in silk. And this must be the Lady Elara. I have heard much of you as well. Elara inclined her head, her composure unwavering. I am flattered, my lord, though I confess, I have heard nothing of you until tonight. The northern Erid is a mystery to me. Cal's eyes glinted with amusement. Then I shall endeavor to make myself less mysterious. My lady, I find that mystery is overrated. It is the truth that we should all be pursuing. An interesting sentiment, Elara said. From a man who read out of the shadows of a hunting forest and vanished just as quickly. The king looked between them, his brow furrowed. You two have met. Cal said. The Lady Elara was kind enough to guide me back to the main hunt. I had lost my way in the wood. Elara did not contradict him, she simply watched, her mind turning over the implications of his arrival. He was here, in the hierarch of the court, speaking with her father, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. And he had done it all at the precise moment when she needed an ally. She did not trust him, she did not trust anyone. But she would use him if she could. I hope you will join us for the remainder of the feast, Lord Cal, she said, her voice smooth. I am sure you have many stories to tell of your northern adventures. Cal's smile widened. I would be honored. My lady. Though I warn you, my stories are not for the faint of heart. He took a seat at the high table, directly beside her, and Elara felt the dewy earth of his presence like a flame in the dark. The courtiers buzzed with speculation. Her mother's eyes were rose slits of suspicion. Seraphina's smile had frozen on her face, brittle as ice, and Julian Ash, seated further down the table, was watching them with a look that had nothing of love in it. It was pure unadulterated hatred. The feast continued, the wine was poured, the music swelled, but the atmosphere had shifted, charged with something electric and dangerous. Everyone in the hall could feel it. Cal leaned at Elara, his voice dropping so low that only she could hear. I told you we would meet again, my lady. I always keep my promises. Then tell me what you want, Elara said, her voice equally soft. Why are you here? Cal's eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw something raw and genuine in their depths. I am here because we share a common enemy, he said. The man you call Julian Ashford has done me a great wrong. A wrong that will never be forgiven. And I am here to see him fall. Elara's breath caught in her throat. What did he do? Cal's smile turned bitter. That is a story for another time, my lady. For now, let us just say that I am your friend in this fight. Whether you trust me or not is your choice, but I will prove myself to you, I swear it. He raised his goblet and Elara raised hers. Their eyes locked over the rim of the silver cups. Across the table, Seraphina watched them with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Julian's hands were white, knuckled on his goblet, and the Dowager Queen Beatrice sat in stony silence, her mind already spinning new webs. The Feast of Wolves had begun. Elara drank her wine and felt the fire of vengeance burn brighter in her chest. The stranger had come, the game had changed. And she would not rest until every one of her enemies was on their knees. The great hall emptied slowly, the nobles drifting away in clusters of wine, flushed laughter and whispered speculation. Elara remained seated at the high table, watching the last of the revelers stumble toward their chambers. The candles had burned low, their flames guttering in pools of molten wax. The tapestries seemed to shift in the fading light. The ancient kings on their battlefields, watching her with knowing eyes. Cal had been called away by the king's advisors, leaving her with a single rotting glance that promised more. Seraphina had retired, pleading a headache, though Elara had seen the calculating glint in her sister's eyes as she departed. Julian had vanished into the shadows of the corridor, his hatred a palpable thing that lingered like smoke. Only her mother remained, seated in the corner of the hall like a spider in her web. You are playing a dangerous game, Beatrice said, her voice searing across the empty space. That northern lord is not what he seems. No man arrives at court without an agenda. And no man looks at a king's daughter the way he looks at you without intending to take something. Elara turned to face her mother. The candlelight carved deep shadows into Beatrice's face, aging her beyond her years for a moment. Elara felt a flicker of something that might have been pity. Then she remembered the cold marble floor of the throne room, the dagger at her throat, the words her mother had spoken as she watched her daughter die. Perhaps he intends to take my hand in marriage, Elara said, her voice Would that not be a suitable match? A northern lord with power and wealth, united with the king's daughter. It would strengthen the realm. Beatrice's lips thinned. You would marry a stranger. A man you have known for less than a day. I married a man I knew for 2 years, Elara replied, her voice dropping to something cold and sharp, and he murdered me, so yes, I would rather take my chances with the stranger. Beatrice's face went pale. What are you talking about? Murdered you? You are standing before me, alive and well. Elara rose from her seat and walked toward her mother, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. She stopped before Beatrice, close enough to see the fine lines around her eyes, the tremor in her hands that she could not quite conceal. I am alive, but I have died. I died on the cold stone floor of this very hall, with Julian's dagger in my heart and Seraphina's laughter in my ears. And you watched me die, and you said nothing, you did nothing. Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. You are speaking madness, you are. I am telling you the truth, Elara said, her voice hard as iron. I do not expect you to believe me, I do not expect you to understand. But I want you to know that I remember everything. And I will not let it happen again. She turned away, leaving her mother sitting in stunned silence, and walked toward the side door of the great hall. The corridor beyond was lit only by the occasional torch, but she knew the way. She had walked these halls 1,000 times, in another life, in another body. She found Kyle waiting for her in the moonlit garden. He stood beneath the ancient oak where she had once hidden from her tutors, his dark cloak blending with the shadows. The pendant at her throat pulsed with warmth as she approached, and she felt a strange sense of rightness settle over her. You knew, she said, stopping before him. You knew what happened to me. How is that possible? Kyle's eyes rushed hers in the moonlight. Because I have seen death too, Elara. I have felt it. I woke in my own body, with the memory of a blade in my back and my family's blood on my hands. Julian Ashford did not just betray you. He betrayed me. He murdered my father, my brother and my betrothed, all in the name of the crown he now wears. Razhir stopped. Your father, your betrothed. My father was the northern lord who held the passes against the Barbarians, Kale said, his voice raw. Julian forged letters that made him seem a traitor. He had him executed in the night, along with my brother. My betrothed was the daughter of a southern lord who refused to bend to Julian's will. She was found dead in her chambers, a dagger through her hair, the same way you died. Elara felt the pieces click into place like the tumblers of a lock. The stranger with storm cloud eyes, the man who read her enemy, the ally she had not known she needed. You came here for revenge, she said. I came here for justice, he corrected. But the two are often the same. Elara reached out and took his hand. His fingers were rough with calluses, arm against her cold skin. Then let us find justice together. The days that followed were a reful dance of deception and strategy. Elara moved through the court with the grace of a woman who had nothing to lose, her crimson gowns replaced by deep blues and somber blacks that reflected her newfound purpose. She spoke to the servants, who saw everything. She listened to the whispers, which told her everything, and she waited. Kale was her shadow, her partner, her confidant. Together, they pieced together the web of Julian's plots, the bribes he had paid, the letters he had forged, the lives he had destroyed. They gathered evidence in secret, hiding it in the hollow of the oak tree in the moonlit garden, where no one would think to look. And then the night came when the trap was ready to spring. The king had called a council, a gathering of his most trusted advisors to discuss the matter of succession. Julian Ashford was among them, his ambition really concealed beneath his practiced smile. Seraphina had been invited as well, her role as the king's favored daughter granting her a seat at the table. Elara entered the council chamber with Kale at her side. The room was filled with familiar faces. Her father at the head of the table, her mother to his right, Julian and Seraphina across from them. The northern lord was greeted with suspicion, his presence unexpected, but Elara's father waved away the objections. Lord Cal has proven himself a loyal ally, the king said. He has brought us intelligence that I believe all of you should hear. Cal stepped forward, his voice steady and clear. Your Majesty, I have uncovered a plot against your crown, a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of your court. Julian's smile faltered. Seraphina's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. Beatrice's face remained impassive, but Elara saw the flicker of fear in her mother's eyes. Speak, Lord Cal, the king commanded, and Kales, he laid out the evidence piece by piece. The forged letters, the bribes paid to the Barbarian tribes, the assassination of loyal lords, The plan to poison the king and place Julian on the throne. He produced documents, sworn testimonies, and the confession of a servant who had witnessed Julian's crimes. The room erupted in chaos. Julian rose to his feet, his face contorted with fury. Lies. All of it lies. This man is a traitor, sent to destroy me. Ross stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. Is it lies, Julian? Is it lies that you seduced my sister, while you were courting me? Is it lies that you promised her the throne in exchange for her help in destroying our father? Is it lies that you killed my grandmother, Dowager Queen Isa? Because she saw through your deceptions. Julian's eyes went wide. How do you? I know everything, Elara said. I know about the dagger you used, the one etched with forever yours. I know about the letters you forged, the poison you brewed, the men you murdered. I know it all. The king rose from his seat, his face white with shock. Julian Ashford, is this true? Julian's mask finally shattered. The handsome face twisted into something ugly and desperate. You fool, he snarled at the king. You have always been a fool. Your daughter is a madwoman, and this northern savage is her puppet. But it does not matter, you cannot prove anything. Oh, but Elara said. And she reached into the folds of her gown to retrieve the pendant of black onyx. She twisted it, and the tar-shaped stone opened to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside was a small, folded parchment, the letter from Julian to Seraphina, written in his own hand, detailing the plan to poison the king and seize the throne. Julian lunged for her, but Kale was faster. The northern lord moved like lightning, his sword drawn and pressed against Julian's throat before anyone could blink. I have been waiting for this moment, Kale growled, his voice low and dangerous, I have dreamed of watching you fall. The guards rushed in, surrounding Julian and Seraphina. Beatrice had risen from her seat, her face a mask of terror. The king stood frozen, his eyes rotting between his daughters, his wife, and the man who had been his most trusted advisor. Take them to the dungeons, the king said, his voice high-ross. All of them. Seraphina, her composure finally breaking. No, you cannot believe them. It is Elara. She is the one who has been plotting against you. Elara met her sister's eyes and saw the truth there. The hatred, the jealousy, the desperate clawing fear. I was never plotting against you, Seraphina, she said softly. I was trying to save you. But you chose to destroy yourself. The guards dragged Julian and Seraphina from the room, their protests echoing through the halls. Beatrice followed in silent defeat, her head bowed, her queen's composure finally broken. The king sank back into his chair, his face aged a decade in minutes. Ra, he whispered, how did you know? How did you see what I could not? Elara knelt before her father and took his hands in hers. I saw it in a dream, father, a terrible dream, and when I woke, I knew I had to act. The king looked at her with eyes that held both sorrow and pride. You have saved the realm, my daughter, you have saved me. He reached out and touched the pendant at her throat. This was Isolde's. She always said you were the strongest of my children. I did not believe her, I was blind. Then let us both see clearly now, Elara said. Later that night, Elara stood in the moonlit garden beneath the ancient oak. The pendant was dewy arm against her chest, and she could almost feel her grandmother's presence beside her. The hollow in the oak held no more secrets. The evidence had been delivered, the traitors had been caught, and the realm was safe. Kale came to stand beside her, his hand finding hers. It is done, he said. Elara shook her head. It is not done. It is just beginning. There is a kingdom to rebuild, a court to cleanse, and a future to shape. Kale turned to face her, his storm cloud eyes soft in the moonlight. And what kind of future do you want? Elara, she looked up at him. At the man who had emerged from the shadows to fight beside her. At the man who had read her pain and her purpose. At the man who had promised to prove himself and had done so 1,000 times over. I want a future where no one is betrayed, she said. Where no one is murdered for ambition. Where the throne is not a prize to be stolen, but a duty to be honored. Kale smiled, and it was a genuine smile. And then I will stay by your side and help you build it. He leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so tender that it made her breath catch. Forever, he whispered. Elara closed her eyes and let herself believe. The pendant at her throat pulsed with myth. And she heard her grandmother's voice in her memory. Wise and we right, trust is a gamble, child. But love is the only bet worth making. She opened her eyes and looked up at Kale. At the future that stretched before them like an endless road. I will hold you to that, she said, and in the moonlit garden, beneath the ancient oak where she had once hidden from her tutors. Not a promise of vengeance, but a promise of hope. The crown she would one day wear would not be forged in betrayal and blood, It would be forged in truth and love, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, she believed it was possible.